Here we go. Start recording. Let's have a look at this. Stupid people took control of our country.
Monday afternoon last September, a 16-year-old boy called Aaron Pryor was shot to death in a driveway near his home in Oakland, California. Even by the standards of midday drive-by shootings, it was an awful crime. Surveillance footage showed the killer firing more than a dozen rounds before fleeing. No one was arrested for the murder, but local media did not seem especially interested in finding out who did it because they already knew. The coronavirus killed Aaron Pryor. That's what they told us. One local television station noted that violence in the area had risen since the pandemic began. They must be connected. Pryor's football coach agreed with this. It was COVID that really killed this kid, he told reporters. The coach didn't explain how exactly COVID had done this killing or what COVID's motive might have been. But no one asked. Everyone, particularly people in power, seemed happy to blame COVID. The pandemic did it. You heard that a lot, and not just in California. Across the country, in New York City, Mayor Bill de Blasio blamed rising crime rates squarely on the virus.
Police organizations will say that part of the reason that crime is up is because there has been a cut in funding to the NYPD. What do you say to that?
This predates any funding decisions. That's just the truth. The perfect storm I mentioned started in March and April when everything shut down, and we saw the violence start in earnest May into June, into July. It's clearly because things came unglued.
Yeah, but why? I mean, why would you? Like, Republicans are themselves the ones who say that we need a stable society, right? Like they say, oh, we need to preserve a marriage because otherwise society becomes undone, right? So how come, why doesn't COVID count as this? Because COVID is, for whatever reason, is considered a liberal thing, so you just have to oppose it. And as a result, it's not like a valid cause of deterioration of society. But it's ridiculous.
Right. It must have been the pandemic. That makes sense.
It does make sense. Obviously, it doesn't justify people actually shooting, but it's just the same as you say that, people being born out of wedlock then cause violence. Like, Republicans say the exact same thing. You recognize that there's systemic factors, even though your factors are kind of silly, but you do believe in the fact that there's systemic factors that will affect things like societal stability. So why would you deny it in this instance? It's just because you're being inconsistent, as usual.
The quarantine did it. We forced everyone to stay home, and that's why there's so many people on the streets shooting each other and pushing strangers into oncoming subway cars.
Yeah, obviously, it said like that, it seems a bit nonsensical. But the idea is more that people, they get frustrated, and that the sort of social stability that there used to be, it breaks down, and also that there's less employment, and so people get more into trouble, and yeah. But that's precisely the kind of rhetoric that Republicans have against giving welfare, right? Is that it kind of breaks down society. So why why do you recognize that giving welfare causes crime, that like a dissolution, like the loss of the nuclear traditional model of family causes crime and stuff, but the COVID doesn't? Makes no sense.
Does that make sense to you? No.
Yeah,
it makes sense to anyone. But thankfully,
I
experts soon emerged
believe
to
in
explain
empirical
why something
evidence.
so obviously untrue must in fact be true. Quote, because of the stresses of the pandemic, they're everywhere, explained a former CIA officer called Jeff Asher to the New York Times. You are seeing this everywhere. Except we're not seeing this everywhere. That's not true. The coronavirus may be global, but rising crime rates are not global. Police in Canada, for example, reported that crime fell by 18% between March and October of last year. In the UK, crime saw its biggest annual decrease in a decade. In Sweden and Russia, crime dropped too. Even in Mexico, which is in the middle of a drug war.
Yeah, okay, sure. But so the idea is that different societies respond to, external stresses in different ways. But the empirical evidence is still there, there's a correlation. Correlation doesn't prove causation, but it tends to imply causation.
There were fewer homicides in 2020 than there were in 2019. So for normal countries, pretty much all countries, the pandemic meant more Netflix, but less killing. Not here. In the United States, the opposite happened. A lot of Netflix, even more killings. You're seeing.
Yeah, but again, you're not doing much to address the causes of violence because, again, you don't want to regulate the guns because you're a shill of the NRA. So obviously, you're like this is like largely the fact that you're not regulating guns properly and that you're not addressing poverty properly.
The data on your screen right now. It's from a nonprofit called the Council on Criminal Justice and researchers at the University of Missouri. It shows the average weekly homicide rate in 21 major cities. Killings spiked in late May, well after the pandemic began. According to the Council on Criminal Justice, quote, homicides, aggravated assaults, gun assaults rose significantly beginning in late May and June of 2020. They jumped by 40% during the summer and 34% in the fall when compared to the previous summer and fall. So far this year, these sad trends have continued. Murders are up 800% in Portland, Oregon. They're up 56% in Minneapolis, scene of George Floyd's death. They're up 27% in LA, 22% in New York. They're up 40% in Philadelphia. So you have to ask yourself, because your life may depend on it, why is this country different from, say, Sweden or Russia or Mexico? And you know the answer. It's not COVID. It's that in our country, stupid, malicious people took full control. The Democratic Party took full control of the country, and their policies resulted in a huge number of killings.
What? Like the Democrats' policies resulted in a huge number of killings when the Democrats' policies are more aligned with those other countries that you've been talking about? That doesn't make sense. The Democrats want to make America more like those other countries. Especially in terms of like public safety, increase public safety, and Republicans, but even Democrats, of course, sometimes are guilty of this, but Republicans, even much more so, are guilty of increasing the causes of violence, even though they claim to be all about law and order. But no, they're not. They're not.
That's not speculation. They've bragged about it. Here they are, bragging about their plans.
The folks in law enforcement that share the goals of reimagining policing.
Reimagining policing in the 21st century.
And see, look, they're saying reimagining policing. It's making policing more like in Europe, where police killings are like literally so much lower that like the average murder rate in those countries is the same as just the police-caused murder rate in the United States, okay? Like, yeah, we need to change the police. You're such a liar, Tucker. Jesus, you're such a horrible liar.
Thinking and reimagining policing.
Community efforts to reimagine policing.
Yeah.
Reimagine policing.
Not saying, yeah, people there are saying defund. The actual politicians there aren't saying defund. We shouldn't defund the police, but the police, it has itself become a criminal organization. Okay.
According to a report in Axios, 20 major U.S. cities have slashed their police budgets in